We are going now to discuss what are the key principles and steps in preparing a management plan for a biosphere reserve. But what I'm going to say goes beyond the biosphere reserves. This is the way in which a proper management plan is prepared in general. In doing that, we will introduce the integrative methodological framework. This integrative methodological framework is now published in a guideline that has been jointly prepared by UNESCO, by UNEP, PAPRAC, and by GWP Med, and under my direction, my guidance. This is the publication, and it is downloadable through the links we will provide to you. I'm not going to get into many details, but it is important to remember that a management plan provides the rationale and the technological tools for the development of the necessary plan, including water resources, coastal areas, and groundwaters, ensures that policy instruments mixes are consistent and supportive, produce policy outcomes, secure best knowledge base, add value to individual approaches that may exist in the area, satisfy different legal requirements. We said that within each one of the biosphere reserves, we may have already protected areas with specific provisions, legal provisions, and institutional provisions. Respond effectively to dynamic environment resulting from the climate change, and this is a major concern, as you know today. Achieve the ownership, shared ownership of the different, not only people, but different sectors that sometimes are in competition. Achieve sustainable development for coastal environment, water resources, including groundwaters that are related to biosphere reserves. And of course, simplify monitoring and evaluation and reporting. I'm not going to read through that, but I tell you that IMF, the Integrated Methodological Framework, has taken all the elements necessary from three types of well-known and established management approaches, which are the integrated coastal zone management, the integrated water resources management, including the coastal aquifer and groundwater management promoted by UNESCO, and the ecosystem-based approach or ecosystem approach. Allow me to remind you a little bit, because of the nature of the biosphere reserves, that through the ecosystem-based approach, we don't care any longer only for the ecosystems. So the first is to recognize the objectives as a society choice. So you see, even in the ecosystem-based approach, the role of the society and the inhabitants is taken as first. And then only in the fifth, sixth, we have prioritized ecosystem services, recognize and respect ecosystem limits, accept the change as inherent and inevitable, the change that is in all natural systems we have, as you know, change. So these principles are all parts of what we need to take into account and what is already described in the integrative methodological framework. This is something that is also very important. This is a policy analysis, a policy cycle analysis that has been introduced by the European Environment Agency and the Organization of Economic, OECD, Economic Development, and the steps are linked in a logical sequence. You have drivers, for example, a major pollution source, an industry, sewage, then going to pressures, explaining the pressures that are brought into the system, the state of the environment, how the environment, what is the state, good or bad, the impacts of the pressures, and then the responses. Based on these responses, we have usually the integrated plan. But this sequence does not start necessarily from the drivers. It may start from the impacts. I see the impact. I see the poor state of the environment. I see that biodiversity is decreasing, which may be a state or it might be an impact. So I start by deciding the protection of the species. This is a measure, is a response. This response, in turn, reduces the pressures, improves the state, reduces the impacts, and so on and so forth. So the management plan has to follow that in the sense that from a vicious circle, we try through the management to go into a virtuous circle. And this is extremely important for everybody to understand in planning something. Then the most important things for a plan is to be implemented to be implementable at the end of the day. To be implementable, it should be integrated. What integration means, again and again, I use this word, but everybody should understand. Integrating policies is the first thing. When I protect an area, I need to have the protection, the environmental protection, linked with the policies, let's say, the agricultural policy. If the agricultural policy is polluting the environment, if the transport policy is polluting the environment, I move in two different directions and I can never have a good implementable plan. So in fact, what we try to do with the plan is to bring the policies together, to make them compatible, not imposing necessarily everything of each policy on the others. And in this way, I make the policy implementable. This requires, I put 8 I's there, the 2, integration and implementation. But I need information. I need the involvement of people. I need to benefit from innovation. I need to not to discover the wheel, but use the international cooperation for that. So, and I have to be open and inclusive to everybody and understand their position and their interest. So with that elements, we start to have the plans. Don't be shy in front of very complex graphics. What is important in this SUDESIR, Sustainable Development in European Cities and Regions, we have tried and implemented it long ago in the island of Rhodes and other areas. What is important here is, first of all, the dialogue. When we have the criteria of what we want to obtain, we put this criteria to the inhabitants and discuss with them what is their view of the best, optimal future of the area, what they would like to see there, and how we are going to measure that. And another thing that is important, very important, is that although in sustainable development we want, as I said before, not to get into sectoral policies, into touristic policies versus agricultural versus fisheries or whatever, we have to see who is the driving force, the driving economic force in the area, so that we use it. For example, in roads, obviously, tourism generates 90% or more of the income. That means that if tourism becomes sustainable and they bring in products from the area, fish from the fisheries of the area, and so on and so forth, then this becomes a driver of sustainability. So we need to plan having this, all this in the back of our head. This is the plan now. The plan has 5 steps, from the establishment to the analysis of the different options, to setting the vision, to designing the measures, and finally implementing, realizing the vision. Getting from the establishment to realizing the vision, I deepen the integration. I go deeper into integration, bringing the different policies together. At the same time, I need to have a constant feedback. Whenever I get to the next step, I understand if something was not proper in the first step, and I make the necessary adjustments. If I describe the different parts, I prefer not to get into that in detail because I have each step described here. So in the establishment, I have to have the exact delineation of the territorial scope of the biosphere reserve, to see, for example, the major river basin, defining, here is important, defining the governance context. But which governance? The governance context of those of the plan. How the plan is going to be governed, who is going to design the plan, and how the plan is going to be followed, monitored. Because at the end of the day, perhaps the ones that have ordered the plan are not necessarily the ones that are going to govern the area. So this has to be clearly identified and defined in your mind. We need to engage stakeholders, so we need the mapping of the stakeholders. We need to propose a potential and initial vision for the biosphere reserve, to see, let's say, which kind of development we see there, to see to which level of protection we go, and also in this way see if there is a need for strategic environmental assessment. In most cases, we don't need that. Then we go to the analysis of futures, which are the key issues. It is, we need to see what are the species we want to protect, what are the monuments we want to protect, what are the key tangible and intangible heritage that needs to be protected or developed or used, and so on and so forth. This is the bulk of the work of analysis and compilation. And this is followed also by alternative scenario on how we are going to do these kind of things. Then we set the vision. Here we need, through consensus building, to bring together all stakeholders and find ways to reconcile eventually conflicting interests, and find also, as I said, agreement on how we measure the success. So this is very important, and this is the basis of the plan. So having a good analysis, having a vision, taking us, and we have to start with a vision which is ambitious enough, but also achievable with different layers, let's say, of ambition, starting with somewhere which can be understood by everybody as win-win, but not getting to the ceiling from the beginning. So based on that, we establish the management scheme and the intersectoral management, the governance. We decide about the governance. We find the authorities that are going to support it, and we have all the approvals for funding and all the rest. And then we come to the implementation. Actually, we dress it, let's say, with the institutional cover. We have we raise the awareness to enhance the partnerships, and we implement the different measures, monitoring at the same time the success. So we need to have the feedback, and the feedback is always based on the OECD DAC criteria. What we have done, how relevant is what we have done, how efficient is what we have done, how effective, what is the impact, and is this what we have done sustainable? So we need to monitor according to this criteria, and if things go not as we wish, and always we have a gap between the ideal implementation and the implementation on the ground, there is no problem. We have to go back and adapt, actually, little by little, in the same way, not in the usual way. The usual way many times when a tree, let's say a law, does not actually satisfy 100% the government or the society, the new government comes and deroots the previous ones and plants a new law, which has the same fate. At the end of the day, it will be the same, because the conditions that make this tree like that usually are the same, remain the same. So what we want is to follow the example of the gardener, of a gardener going there and pruning the tree. This is the way we want to have the adaptive management. We go and correct what was not correct, but keep the roots and the basis for that. So in this way, with the adaptive management, we usually succeed, and I think that you have to try. So thank you very much. I wish you a big success when you start drafting and implementing a management plan.